All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and first I want to say thank you all for coming today. It's important, I think, that we are transparent and open and try to be as much forthcoming as we can to share what this department has accomplished, what your department has accomplished this year. Just last week we met in this room, myself and about 25 other individuals, and we went over our balanced scorecard from last year. What were our goals? What did we achieve? Where did we fall short? What strategies do we need to improve on? And we set our goals that will be for 2021. 2020 was certainly a year not only challenging for across our country, but also here in Newport News. I'd be remiss if I didn't start off with tomorrow is the anniversary of Officer Thine, who we lost. She gave her life in the line of duty to this city, this department, a year ago tomorrow. So I think that started off a rough year for us. Then we moved into the pandemic, and then a lot of the social unrest that we saw, the results of Minneapolis, Atlanta, and Wisconsin. We had multiple demonstrations, protests, and rallies here in the city. So I want to start by saying I am grateful and humbled to work with the men and women of this organization. They still come to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They miss time with their families here for the holidays to service to this community. I cannot be more honored to work with such talented people, sworn and civilian both. And I wanted to start by telling them thank you. What they do in this city makes a difference, and it contributes 100% to what we're going to show you here today. The other thank you I would like to say goes to our city manager, Ms. Rolfe, the mayor, city council, and my direct report to Mr. Archer. We have a lot of good conversations. There's a lot of hard questions, as it should be. And we talk about how do we serve the citizens of this city the best we can? How do we make this law enforcement agency the most professional that we can? And how do we improve every day? We sit and meet multiple times a day and talk about how do we make things better. And not just in-house. We work with a lot of people outside. We'll talk about some of those entities that we work with, some of our resources and relationships that we have as we go forward through this presentation. But I want to tell them thank you for the support and the relationship that I have with them for how they've worked with this department. And I appreciate not only the professionalism, but the personal relationship that I have with our city council, our mayor, and city manager. So with that said, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to start off with showing our crime numbers. I will show 2020 compared to 2019. You'll see increases and decreases. You'll see a number of change, and then you'll also see the percentage. You'll see some of our accomplishments. I'll show you our clearance rates. I'll talk about our calls for service, our citizen interactions, and we'll look at citizen complaints that we have had, and hopefully you'll see a trend. I think the numbers will speak for themselves. Once we finish, I think it'll be about 15 or 20 minutes. Once we finish, if you have some questions, I'll be glad to take them. And then we'll make the presentation available to you if you would like to have it. So again, thank you for being here and taking your time. But I do think it's important that we are open and transparent and share what goals we have with this department and what we're accomplishing. Also, a big thank you goes out to our citizens. They are the best resource we have. The 180,000 citizens in this city that work with this department, communicate with us and share information with us. Without them, we could not do or be as successful as we have been, and they are a tremendous asset in this great city. So I first want to start out on this slide to my left, right? You're going to see all the slides here. You're going to see the numbers for 2019. We capture the numbers that the FBI captures. When these numbers are reported and the FBI collects their data, the state police collects their data. For this year, the city of Newport News achieved a 14% reduction in crime. Our murders stayed the same at 25. We were about 2 under, and we had 2 murders the last week of December in 2020. We had numbers were close in rapes. We had a good reduction in robbery. Aggravated assault continues to be our violent crime that continues to move forward. And the one crime that we have not been able to address to decrease is our domestic aggravated assaults. Domestic aggravated assault, where there's any type of choking or strangulation, is an aggravated assault. Aggravated assaults are also our shootings, it's our stabbings, our bad beatings, or assaults that require medical attention, the intent to maim, kill, or disfigure, but it's also our domestic aggravated assaults. I believe wholeheartedly that we are treating our victims better, that our responses have been better, and our clearance rates are through the roof because most of the time we know the individual or individuals who've committed that. male or female. But we'll talk a little bit about why we think those things are continuing to happen. We understand the pandemic, the stress in life, people being cooped up, not being able to get out, not to be able to go some different places, unsure where money's going to come from, jobs, all those things I think play a factor. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, how that affects people, and some things that we're trying to do as we move forward. So if you take all those numbers, you crunch them together, our violent crime and our property crime, the city did achieve a 14% reduction in crime. Now, what's significant about that is last year we had a 9% reduction in crime, and the year before that we had a 5%. So when I look at our strategies and our initiatives, right, I see crime continuing to go down. We're not there yet by any stretch of the means. We have a long way to go. But I want to make sure that those strategies and initiatives are working. But this is directly attributed to the men and women of this organization, sworn and civilian both, our detectives, our officers who work around the clock, but also our citizens in our neighborhoods. And I cannot be more proud of them. I want to take a look at kind of the last 4 or 5 years of our average about crime. Each one of these represents an incident. From 2016, there were 6,494 crimes in our city. And you can see the trend where we're at today for 2018, 2019, and 2020. And I want to stop here for a minute because I constantly talk to our command staff and our officers. You're going to look at some numbers today, and you're going to see increases, you're going to see decreases, you're going to see clearance rates. But each one of those numbers represents an individual, a community, a neighborhood. And I don't take that lightly. I don't lose light of that. But the reason I look at these numbers is because if I can't measure it, it makes it very, very difficult to manage. So when we look at our initiatives and our strategies and our outreach, if I see crime decreasing, then those are things I want to build on. But if I have those same initiatives and strategies and I see crime increasing, then I've got to be able to look at that. Where do we make a change? How do we reevaluate? Where do we stop what we're doing and try something different? Whether we look to other agencies, whether we look around the country here locally in the Hampton Roads, the relationship that I have with the other chiefs and departments, we constantly talk about strategies that are working or strategies that we need to change and improve on. I joke with our guys in the room that we can't police the same way we did in 1985. We have to change. But I say all those things as we evolve, that each one of these incidents I understand as an individual. It affects a family and a neighborhood and a community. And I never want to lose sight of that. The people that we serve are the residents of this city. But I do think you show from 2016 going down to 2020 a trend of the direction I'd like us to go, and we continue to move forward. So we look at our shootings. We looked at the last 5 years. Now these are not self-inflicted shootings. They are not suicides. These are criminal shooting investigations, if you will. Where we were in 2016, where we were in 2017 and 2018, we're about the same. We dropped to 79 in 2019. That was the lowest we've had here in the city since 2012. And this year, we were right around the same number. We had an increase of 2. We went from 79 to 81. And I'll tell you, the numbers may flip a little bit, change a little bit. There's a couple cases that we believe are self-inflicted, but we may not get those cases resolved, right? They may not come to closure until the end of February or March. The detectives are working very hard on those. But as we stand today, this is what our numbers would be. This is what we would report to the state police and the FBI. So you saw the first screen, our homicides, but I still want to take a look, kind of a snapshot of where we're at, where the city's at over the last 4 or 5 years. From 2016, we had 31 homicides, and 2019 and 2020, we both ended the year at 25. And we'll talk about our clearance rates as we move a little bit forward. Another thing we like to measure is the firearms, the illegal firearms that we take off the street. So when I talk about illegal firearms, an individual that may have used a firearm in the commission of a crime, an individual who is a convicted felon that's in possession of a firearm, firearms that are being sold or traded, search warrants that individuals may have illegal narcotics while in possession of a firearm. Those are all type of things that we're talking about. So it's kind of, if you look at our crime, it has trended down over the last 5 years, and you look at the seizure of firearms. And last year was a record number for us. Over 1,000 firearms were seized in the city of Newport News. And those come from vehicle traffic stops. They come from search warrants, individuals on the street, individuals that throw firearms, firearms that are, like I said, that are legally traded or sold, have the serial numbers obliterated. We have a great partnership with our federal agencies. The ATF works hand in hand with us. We have an officer on that task force, and we look at the firearms that are seized and taken. We work with the ATF and the federal prosecutors as well as our Commonwealth Attorney's Office to see where those cases best fit. But the ATF is a great asset and resource for us, as all our federal partners are. So at the beginning, if you remember, when we did this last year, we selected 3 neighborhoods. Now each precinct will follow crime trends and patterns. They have crime analysts that kind of set and tell us where some of the crimes are at, and we try to get ahead of that in almost a predictive analysis, if you will. But we looked, this time last year, we selected 3 neighborhoods that we wanted to focus on as a department. 1 in each precinct, right? 1 in the north, 1 in the central, 1 in the south, of where we wanted to focus at, where we would put other resources than just what's in the precinct, where we would deploy K-9, where we would do traffic enforcement, where we wanted to address environmental issues with lighting, where we wanted to have community youth and outreach, do walks in the neighborhood, even with youth or our different partners that we have. We selected the Beachmont neighborhood, Marshall Courts, and we selected Tricia Drive and Tricia Lane and Dresden Drive. Hope that comes out okay. Dresden Drive and Tricia Lane. Now our goal was to have a 10% reduction in each one of those neighborhoods, and we focused on it from January 1st all the way to the 31st. This is where we would put extra patrols. This is where we would use different divisions, different units. In the Beachmont area, we had our biggest success. We had over a 28% reduction in crime in Beachmont. We had another 5% reduction in Marshall Courts, about the same thing we had last year, but we wanted to, or the year before, we wanted to focus on Marshall Courts again as the city puts a lot of effort. Our C&I down in the southeast community, that's an area that we want to stay in, we want to stay focused in. There's some great things going to happen there, and I will tell you that the South Precinct had another great year of crime reduction. This is the 3rd year in a row that the South Precinct had a reduction in crime. They're doing some great things down there, not just crime, but also focusing on clearance rates and community and partnership and relationship building. And they just did a phenomenal job. And then in Dresden Lane and Tricia Lane, also our goal was a 10% reduction. And we achieved a little over a 5% reduction there. We'll talk about the 3 neighborhoods that we're going to select, that we have selected this year as we move forward, that we're going to focus on, that we believe plays a role in the overall spectrum of how the city looks at the end of the year in crime. Now this slide, I want to cover 2 points. I want to talk about the calls for service that officers go to, the number of times we interact with a citizen. Then I also want to look at that number in relationship to how many complaints do citizens make. We can talk about the percentage of what those complaints are, but I think that's, especially in today, the national conversation going on about relationships with police and reimagining law enforcement and how it best serves our citizens, I think it's important. In 2018, we had 168,905 calls for service, 168,905 times we interacted with a citizen in this community. Out of that, 108 complaints were filed against the police department. That's 0.063. And I think that's important. When we talk about how are we dealing with our citizens, how are we interacting, are we being a professional law enforcement? 168,905 times we interacted with a citizen, and we had 108 complaints. You see the number for 2019, 182,000 calls for service went up, our citizen interaction went up, but our citizen-generated complaints went down to 86. That dropped from 0.63 to 0.47. Why is that? In 2020, our calls for service dropped a little bit, our citizen interaction from, still up from 2018, but it dropped from 2019. So in 2020, we had 173,000 plus interactions with our citizens, but our complaints dropped again, from 108 to 86 to 80. So why does that happen? I believe it is because, well, I will tell you. First, it starts with me. It starts with the top of this organization that makes it a focal point that we're going to treat and interact with our citizens professionally with empathy and understanding. How we treat people in this profession matters. We've seen that across our country, right? That is when we talk about reimagining police and how we work with our citizens and our communities, how we treat people matters. When I make that a focus of this department, when the assistant chiefs, the captains and lieutenants, the officers are training in our academy, when we go through our in-service, so not just our new recruits that come in, but we get it each year when we go through our in-service to keep our certification. We talk about it when we bring new recruits onto this department. When we hire people, when they sit across from me, and before at the end of the day, we ask, why do you want to join law enforcement? And then we ask the second question, right? Why do you want to do it in this city? And what I'm looking for are people that want to think outside the box, solve problems, be involved, be a resource to our citizens, right? Make things better. That's what I'm trying to get accomplished. That's the people that I want to come here. That's the people that are going to have great careers here. When the detectives go in and they talk to recruits and we ask them, what do you want to do in your career? And you hear anything from narcotics to traffic enforcement to special victims to aggravated assault, the best element to get to those divisions is how you talk to people. That you can sit in a table or a vehicle or stand on a street corner across from someone and have a conversation that they believe you care about them. I need to see those numbers continue to drop. If my Lieutenant of Internal Affairs was here, Lieutenant Harrison, he would tell you, out of the 108, the 86 and 80, the percentage of what those complaints are about 80%. And it is about demeanor, about how we talk to citizens. But when I look overall at the big picture of our calls for service, our citizen interactions, what we're doing in the community, and I look at those percentages, and I look at those complaints dropping, I think that's important. I think our officers need to know that. They need to know that that makes a difference. When we talk about our crime rate, why does crime continue to go down? Why are complaints dropping? I believe it's because we're continuing to push professionalism, and not just from people that look like me, meaning in this uniform. I'm talking about bringing people in to work with us, the Virginia Unity Project. And we work with our local pastors and churches. And Dr. Lyons, who's come on board to talk a lot about us to our recruit class. She did a whole session here about cultural competency with our leadership team. Those things are important. Understanding people, empathy. Everybody has a value. And when we can sit and have those discussions amongst ourselves and with our citizens, we may not always agree, but if we can sit down and have good dialogue and good discussions, that's one thing that when I first got here, I spent a lot of time with our city manager and our mayor, and we talked about how we treat people, what this department should look like. There's a lot of talent here, but the more we embrace each other, the more we share those things together, I believe that is a direct result. That's why we have citizens on our interview panels when we do promotions. That's why we have citizens on our use of force review board. I want to be open and transparent. I want to open the doors of this community with this department to have a relationship, and I think it's paying off. I didn't mean to go too long there, but I think that's important when we talk about what we're doing in this community and what we're doing in this department. So we talked about what our crime is, right? So one side of the house is we're reducing crime. We're trying to reduce the crime that occurs. The other side of the house falls under Assistant Chief Randall. It falls under the investigative side of the house. Our precinct detectives under Chief Grinstead, and our aggravated assault, homicide, and special victim detectives under Chief Randall. This is about crimes that occur, and are we solving them? The far right, in 2018, you're going to see the average clearance rates. That's when you look at the departments across the country. The FBI produces a number of what we should be seeing our clearance rate. Cases occur, how are we solving them? Our goal is always to be above the national average. When we set our goals, some of the guys and gals, when we talk about what our goal is going to be like, Chief, that's awful high. But we're going to strive for that. The national clearance rate for homicide is 62.5%. We ended last year with 64%. We did an outstanding job. Sergeant Ross, now Lieutenant Ross in the Special Victims Division, 33% clearance rate for rape is the national average. We were clearing over 60%. Look at our robberies, our aggravated assaults, 70%. And I will tell you, one of the hardest things about aggravated assault are shootings, because oftentimes we get a lot of cooperation when we have a homicide in the city. Someone lost their life. But shootings, you get sometimes individuals are frustrated, they're upset, and they want to try to handle things on their own. They cleared almost half the shootings that we had in this city. That is unheard of. That's huge. Our burglaries, our larcenies. The one I was concerned about as we got into October and November was our vehicle theft. We were kind of teetering, and I wasn't sure where we'd end up. We ended up having an 18% clearance rate compared to almost a 14% for the national average. This is a direct result of citizens working with officers, detectives getting to know citizens, talking to people, and individuals coming forward. I could not be more impressed with that. So when we met, we bumped up our goals for this year, especially with our homicides. We want to push that a little bit harder. But that stuff matters, and it brings resolve to families that have are either victims themselves or family members or relationship to individuals who have been victims to violent crimes. I also want to take a look at, because of what's going on in our country, we've been focused on the opioid epidemic for a while. I want to kind of take a look at where we're at with that balance. So here you're going to see a slide that covers not only fatal overdoses, but also overdoses for medical attention. Our fire department, our paramedics, our hospitals just do an amazing job. In 2018, we had 30 deaths of opioid overdose and 92 overdoses with medical attention. In 2019, we dropped our fatalities to 21. But you see the overdoses, the increase. And then look at 2020. 44 people in the city lost their life to overdose. Whether they live in this city or not, that epidemic, when we talk about heroin and fentanyl and mixing it with other legal narcotics. That is not just a Newport News issue. It's not just a Peninsula issue. It's not just a Hampton Roads issue. That is across our state and across our country. So we sit down and we try to work with psychologists and medical professional. And why does that happen? And I think it again goes back to the issues with frustration, people out of work, individuals that are not sure what they're going to do, where their next check's coming from, this pandemic that we're going through, a lot of stress, people that have lost loved ones, that stress in their life that they may turn to this. 229 overdoses in this city. And I credit the hospitals that we have here. I credit our fire department and our paramedics with Narcan that save lives. They save lives. Some of our officers have Narcan. They save lives. But when I look at those numbers, 44 people lost their life to overdose. And then I look at the same thing with suicides. In 2017, we had 20 people that took their life. 2018 and 2019 were the same with 24, but in 2020 we had 31 individuals. That's a 30% increase in suicides in our city. Why does that happen? What's driving that? I want to do a better job of understanding that and trying to work with people on the front end. I will tell you, we have issues with domestic violence. That's why we hired 2 civilians to come in here and help us address domestic violence, that we treat our victims better. Not only do they teach us how to address some things, how to treat victims better, but they also are proactive in bringing awareness. If you looked back at us in October a couple years ago, you would have seen us do a couple things for Domestic Violence Month. But I will tell you, this year, or well, last year in 2020, it was almost every day. I couldn't keep up with Kelly and her team and Nisha and Sheriff, all the things that they were doing. We even had the building lit up in purple, and I was shocked at the number of people called and said, thank you for pushing this, for making people aware. We're going to talk a little bit about in a couple slides about things we're going to do this year, but I think it's important that we know what these numbers are, that officers know what these numbers are, and we know the real struggles that individuals face. So some of our accomplishments. I didn't want to list everything. It would take us multiple slides, right? But I tried to hit some of the big things. We'll just talk to you a little bit about domestic violence. We hired 2 civilians to come on board and work with us. They have done an amazing job just in the 7, 8, 9 months that they've been here. They have just done a tremendous impact on how we treat individuals who suffer through domestic violence. And what we have now is officers who will go to a call, and there may be a family argument where no assault has taken place, but if we've gone to the same house multiple times, that they will reach out and these 2 ladies will make a phone call to make sure that people are okay. I want individuals to know if they're in that situation that this department cares about them, that we're trying to do things on the front end to decrease something from bad from happening. We fully staffed our 911 center. If you would have heard me in this room last year, the #1 goal I had is our dispatchers, who I believe should be considered first responders. The work they do is phenomenal, but they were very understaffed. And it is a high stressful job. They hear information come in, they don't get to see the resolve. They hear officers talk on the radio, and sometimes we get ratcheted up on a call that we're going on, and they'll sit there and they hear that, and they're trying to direct and keep everyone calm. We were about 24 dispatchers down this time last year. It was our #1 priority to fill that 911 center, and we did it. About 2 weeks before the end of the year, we have a class in right now of about 12 or 13 dispatchers. We are fully staffed in that 911 center, and that's important. We're able to relax some of the schedules, not so much mandatory overtime now. We can go back to a different schedule, but we are working those individuals hard, and they are dedicated people. When you dial 911 and you hear them on the other line, they should be the ones teaching us how to talk to people. They do an amazing job, but we wanted to make a commitment to staff that center the way it should be, and we did that. That direct credit goes to Fran Mangrum and her team, Captain Bradley, Lieutenant Funiak, Assistant Chief Hudgens, who's now down in Pineville. They really worked hard, and I cannot be more impressed with them. We're going to continue increase our training on autism. We had several trainings last year on autism and some festivals that we didn't get to attend. I've had some people reach out to me. They want to do some things with us. We're certainly going to partner with them, but we incorporated that, increased that in our academy, and we had about 80 individuals that went through an autism school. There's a school going on, I just got some information on up the road in Richmond that we're going to send a couple officers to. But autism is important. How individuals act with lights and uniforms, sound. I want to make sure that I'm giving officers the best education I can, the best training to understand that. We have some experts in our department, but it's important that we're not just teaching about autism from individuals in uniforms. I want parents to come in who have children who have challenges with autism and can talk about things that they see. Our 21st Century Policing series from Community Awareness. This is something that as we went through the summer and we saw a lot of the protests and demonstrations, a lot of questions came out about chokeholds, about training, about recruiting, about discipline, about internal affairs. And we would answer a lot of the same questions multiple times. If you remember, myself and the mayor went down and we talked in City Hall, and we talked a lot answering some of those questions. But what I wanted to do is we did a series of interviews, or a series of videos, if you will, and we put the experts in the seat, and they talked about 7 to 10 minutes about how to make a complaint, how we recruit, how we train in our academy, what does our Special Victims Division do, what does Internal Affairs do. And then a week later, they would do a live chat where citizens could ask, email in or through Facebook, right, ask questions. So now if we get individuals who call or ask about those topics that we've talked about, duty to intervene, that we can send them a link and show them exactly what we do. That has been a tremendous benefit for us, trying to be open and transparent. So we would spend 1 week with a 7 to 10 minute description, and then a week later, 30 minutes to an hour about talking and answering questions. CALEA, the Triarch Award, that's very valuable to me. As we move forward, a lot of things are going to focus on our policies and procedures. What do you have in place? We saw that when we talked about, for me, one of the things that we changed was the duty to intervene before we had the duty to inform. We listened to that national conversation. We made that change in our policy. But CALEA is an accreditation organization that we pay to come in and evaluate police departments. They evaluate on three stages. Our 911 Communications Center, they evaluate our policies and procedures, our overall organization, and then on our training. Now some departments will bring in one at a time. They may do one multiple years. We brought all three in at one time, and it took about 2 or 3 months to get it completed. And at the end of that, they have a community forum where they allow citizens to come in and talk about the department. We had pastors in this room, pastors, citizens, business people, professionals, youth that came in and talked about this department. I will tell you, the Triarch Award means that we passed all three. Communications, policy, our overall department, our training. That's huge. Are we accredited? There are only 3 in the state of Virginia and only 22 across the country. That matters. That is another way of holding ourselves accountable. That is not an easy feat. And there's some people in the back of the room that when it comes CALEA time and certification time, oh, they know they got to buckle down. They want to see everything. But that is a good process to have. It's important to me that this department stays accredited and keeps us up in this top shelf. We're always looking at how to do better. And to bring those professionals in, lawyers, former police chiefs, investigators, teachers that come in and look at our organization from top to bottom, that's important. That matters. Implicit bias training, that was something that I promise you will be a mandate before the end of the year. As I listen to things coming out from the governor's office, DCJS, implicit bias training is important. One of the challenges we have in the department, I think most departments have, is when classes come up, we can only send so many. So what I wanted to do is bring the professionals here to train the trainer. I now have 10 individuals on this department who can train our department on implicit bias training, meaning that in explaining that we all have biases, right? How we see things or how we view things. But the implicit bias training talks about and shows us how to recognize those biases, know what they are, and make sure that we don't use them to influence us how we interact with citizens. I use the example all the time. If I see someone, I'm a baseball fan, so if I see someone with a New York Yankees jersey or baseball hat, I got to take a step back. I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan. But that may be someone who just bought that hat, someone give it to them as a gift. I talk about those things so we understand and we have good conversation. We opened up the class for 30 seats. I had 10 Newport News police officers in this room that now can train our department in implicit bias training. Our goal, and we will meet it, is that every officer in this city, including the chief of police, will go through implicit bias training by December 31st, 2021. Every officer. But in this room, there were 20 other individuals. We had people from Utah, Nebraska, North and South Carolina that came up to get that same training. Women in law, The average police department, the average, has about 14% females in law enforcement. Our department has 18%, fastly approaching 19. Our academy class that will start in February is almost 50% women. I want to bring more women into this profession. I want to bring more women into this organization, and I need more women in leadership in this department. And I know there's some challenges. I spent a lot of time last year asking individuals, why don't you apply for sergeant or lieutenant? Why do you not go for captain? Why do you not do that? And I learned some different things. Well, we don't think we have a shot. It's a male-dominated field. Single mothers, I get those things. We can work around that. There's a lot of studies out there that show use of force incidents decrease when a female officer is on the scene. Males are quicker to use force than others. We look at things differently, and I value them. I value their expertise. They are a tremendous resource. So we did a series. We profiled four women in this department. Lieutenant Fudiak, who's the commander of our SWAT team. Melissa Morgan, who does our community youth and outreach. Jerissa Stewart, who's in patrol and she's a shining star. She's going to be a tremendous officer and leader in this department. And Sergeant Ross, who's now Lieutenant Ross, who for years has done our special victims, is now as a lieutenant in North Precinct. We're releasing those each week on Facebook. I hope you get a chance to take a look at them because it really highlights the work that they do and what they bring to this organization. They are phenomenal people. But that is one of the things that I wanted to focus on, and Kelly's team did a great job. DCJS conversations, there's about 5 or 6 departments that DCJS is talking to right now. We have 2 sessions a week. It's made up of individuals from the Department of Criminal Justice Services. It's made up of individuals in our community. We have school teachers, I have pastors, I have citizens and youth. And we talk twice a week about how we get better, We were one of the departments selected to do that. That's huge. And the last thing I want to talk about is our CARE program. Now there's a process on the next slide is going to talk about the Marcus alert that we're trying to put together and how departments across the state of Virginia respond to issues of mental illness. That officers become second responders as opposed to first responders. Right? We're still going to have to go because sometimes things get violent. But for the most part, we would like to see us be the second responders and have professionals, clinicians, and paramedics be the first responders. I've been asked to sit on that committee to talk about how our state best responds. But as we work through those things, our department is already ahead of the game. Last year we met with the city council and our city manager, and we talked about what we can do. Right now we have in place, we're about 80% there. We have an officer that is taken off the street and permanently assigned to the hospital that can monitor individuals that come in for medical treatment about some mental challenges. The fire department and our behavioral health clinician will be in a vehicle that they will respond to calls of mental illness, homelessness, people who are talking about suicide, right? You saw the slide earlier. People that have overdosed, they'll respond first to try to address some things differently. That's thinking outside the box. That's important. That is a commitment from our city, not just the police department, our city, to make things better. You saw those numbers of suicides and the numbers of overdoses. There was a reason I showed them to you. Officers get called to those calls all the time. And I think we've got to partner as we move in reimagining law enforcement. You people talk about defunding the police. These are things we talk about putting funding to. Our city's ahead of the game. Partnering with the fire department, our hospitals, our behavioral health individuals that are going to help us get there. This is going to be a huge game changer. So I've talked to you about the Marcus Alert Task Force, being able to be a part of that. I think my first meeting is coming up in the first week of February. We have training on communication and de-escalation. Now right now we don't get any in-service credit for this type of training, right? We already have de-escalation in our training. I want to hit on that on 2 sides. But I believe it's just as important to de-escalate on the back end as it is on the front end. An individual is arrested, we try to calm people down before we make an arrest, instead of making an arrest, right? We try to control the situation, de-escalate. But if those situations occur where we have to make an arrest, I believe it's okay that after that arrest takes place that my name is so-and-so, I'm here for this reason, you had a warrant on file, it didn't have to happen, it's nothing personal. We're going to go to the magistrate, you're going to get a court date, you may or may not get bond, we'll work through that. But to make it a human, add humanity into that. Instead of you have a warrant on file, you're under arrest, and we transport A to B and we're done. We let people know that they still have value, that a warrant has been obtained. About 65% of the arrests we make are because warrants are already on file. Someone has already obtained a warrant, whatever it may be for, it's already on file. And then we're going to bring in some experts to work with us about communication. We're going to show our video camera, our body-worn camera of situations where officers have talked very, very well to citizens and made great comments and had good dialogue in stressful situations. Sergeant Kemp is an example of that. But we're also going to show our body-worn camera footage where we have not done so well, that things get put on social media because of things we say. Lieutenant Harrison has done an extensive amount. Hey, like I said, 80% of the complaints we get are about demeanor. And we're going to look at that in-house of our own department, not what happens in Oakland, California, or New York, or Miami, or San Diego. We're going to look at what happens here. And we're bringing in Dr. Lyons is going to come in and work with us, Kelly and her team, of how what we say can be on social media and explode, how it's important. Again, when we talk about those complaints from 106 to 86 to 80, when we put emphasis on that and show we're pushing on that, I expect to see even more decreases next year. We're going to continue to focus on mental health. Again, thinking outside the box. We're going to have second responders that are going to be trained by Human Services and are going to work for the police department. I'm going to put them in Central Precinct and they're going to work evening hours, an added asset to our department. So instead of having to call Human Services and talk to them about we have a individual who's homeless, we have a 3-year-old here that his mother has been arrested or she's been injured and we don't have any family here, I will have resources already in the evening up till 2, 3 in the morning. That's something different. That's being ahead of the game. It's trying to think outside the box and bring those different resources in together to address the needs of our community. Our focus on technology. We're going to spend a lot of time on technology this year. There are so many applications. I want to work smarter. There are so many different applications with apps that we can put on cell phones, that we can put diagrams on to cell phones so officers know an area or a building that they may enter in. That if an individual has gone to a public building or done something like we saw at the Capitol and this individual maybe have charges we're looking for right away, that I can send that to an officer's phone. Where it's great if they're in the office and they're looking at their computer in their car, but so many times they're out of their car and can get that information quickly. That's important. We're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of investment on technology. How do we do better with the resources that we have? And then our young adult police commissioners and our youth. We're going to continue to focus. We're still meeting with our young adult police commissioners. That's a freshman, junior, and senior, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior from every high school. Lieutenant Morgan and Captain Tegens do a phenomenal job with that group. I have them do events with me. We went to the food bank earlier this year. We've had discussions, and I will tell you, before the class graduates in March that's in now, the recruit class, who are just a couple years older than some of the young people we have that we work with, we're going to go off-site. We're going to space out. We're going to be safe. But Dr. Lyons is going to come in and do a moderate, and they're going to have a conversation. How teenagers, youth in our city, I think are some of the most talented people, right? We're going to hear their thoughts about policing, what they want to see from their police department, what they want to see from officers. And then I want officers who are just a few years older than them that have just gone through 6, 7 months in the academy, getting ready to do field training. I want them to have interaction and talk to each other and talk about real life situations, how they respond, how we service people, how we help people in situations. So those are sort of the things that we're going to continue to focus on as we move into 2021. Some are new, and some will be building and taking what we have to the next level. We talked about earlier the 3 neighborhoods we're going to focus on this year as a whole for a whole department. And I asked the precincts and the officers to come up with solutions and ideas. North Precinct feels that there is more work they can do in Beach Mountain neighborhood, and they've asked to focus on that neighborhood again this year. And remember, that had a 28% reduction in crime last year, but they feel like there's more they can do. The same in the South Precinct with Marshall Courts. With C&I and the revitalization that's going to take place there, it's just going to be amazing. I want us to keep a good footprint there. I want us to continue to walk in Marshall Courts, to ride our bikes in Marshall Courts, to work with citizens there as that South Precinct area just evolves. All the investment and the revitalization is going to take place there. I want the police department to be a part of it. And then in the Central Precinct, not too far, just right across the street from us, Central Precinct is going to focus on Randolph and the Bellwood area. We had a couple shootings there and a homicide that related around drug activity, and that's an area that we need to focus on. We seem to get more and more calls there, and I don't want that to increase and expand. I want to put a good hold on that and make sure that we're addressing that. Matter of fact, the officers in the precinct went walking in that neighborhood just the other day. They came across an individual who was renting an apartment that had all kinds of problems. The lighting was out, sewage was coming up, pipes had busted. We got a hold of city officials. They came in and we got her relocated. The city helped us tremendously about getting things done. That's when we talk about addressing problems, thinking outside the box, being proactive. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, solving problems and helping citizens in our community. Those initiatives, all of those collectively, integrated together, is what has allowed us to have a 14% reduction in crime this year. I want to continue to build on that. We don't have all the answers. We make mistakes. I make plenty of them. It's okay to say we're sorry. But we were better today than we were yesterday. And we'll be better tomorrow than we are today. And the men and women, sworn and civilian, and the citizens of this city, the leadership of this city, our city manager, our mayor, our city council, everyone has played a role. And I am very, very grateful. I think that's our last slide. Be glad to take a few questions. If I didn't cover anything, I hope I didn't hold you too long. But again, I think it's important that we give credit to those who've achieved those statistics, that have played a role in that. And I also think it's important to be transparent with our community about where we're at. That we have a 14% reduction in crime, on top of a 9% last year and a 5% the year before. That our calls for service, we see them go up, we see our complaints go down. But we still have more to do. We haven't hit that peak yet. I don't know that we ever will. But we have to continue to strive for it. So I do want to thank you all for taking your time to be here today. Thank you for bearing with me as we go through that. I just think it's important that our citizens see what we've accomplished together. Does anybody have any questions? I'll be glad to address anything if I can.
I was just going to say, you had talked about suicides going up,
yeah,
and the opioid overdoses going up.
Yes, sir.
And the one area with the violent crime that went up was the aggravated assaults.
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering, you talked about how the opioids and the suicides could have been attributed to I think you referenced like
all the stressors.
Joblessness, the pandemic.
Yes.
And would you also say that aggravated assault could stem from that as well? And I'm also wondering,
sure,
how much of those aggravated assaults are domestics? Because we heard a lot about people home together all the time. Is that causing increased domestics?
Peter, that's a great question. You nailed it. I will tell you, for about 5 months, starting in, if Chief Randall was here, he would give you the exact numbers. But I would say starting probably in April, May, when we started to see things shut down, for about 5 or 6 months, our top call for service was domestics. And I will tell you, we were going about 20 a day. So if you take 20 times 30, it was over 600 calls a month on domestic situations. I believe it is a direct result of people being cooped up, of frustration, people having individuals with the pandemic that maybe have lost loved ones, or people were sick, unsure about jobs being shut down, unsure about where they're going to work, where the next paycheck's coming in, unsure about kids being out of school. How do I balance that, making choices? Do I work full-time? Do I scale back my work? How do I take care of my kids? Am I going to go to work and leave the kids at home? I think that is absolutely, we saw that when that spike hit, we saw that when those overdoses happened. It really ticked right before the start of the summer and just kind of has carried through. I think the overdoses, the number of suicides, I think, are a direct result or tie into that. All of those things, life's hard enough, right? All those pressures. And when we talk about our response to those things, officers get called to those situations. The aggravated assaults. So aggravated assaults is a shooting, a stabbing, or a bad beating. And domestic violence with strangulation. Now, there's a few others if someone throws a substance, or if you throw a rock and hit someone, an object, brandishing a firearm. But I will tell you, we only had an increase of 2 shootings. The thing that's driving our aggravated assaults, again, are domestic violence situations. If I took out the domestic violence aggravated assaults, you would see the last 3 years they've gone up, and this year significantly. That was one of the reasons last year we tried to bring on some civilians to help us. I do believe that we're treating victims better. I think we're getting out in front of some things, but domestic violence is the one crime that I have not been able to drop in the last 3 years. And it's hard, right? Officers are driving down the street, they're looking in the neighborhood, whether it's a surveillance, but it happens behind walls, right? Behind closed doors. And I really have got to push and ask citizens, if someone shares with you or you hear something, people who live next door or above or below, or someone shares something with you at work, that you report that you let us respond to it. But domestic violence is what is pushing our aggravated assaults. It's not our shootings. We only had an increase of 2. It is domestic violence and strangulations. And I think you're exactly right, how all that ties in to stress and pressure and frustration of the times that we're going through.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
One of the other things I wanted to ask was, is there any feedback you're getting from citizens who are telling you directly that the pandemic is taking a toll? And the other thing was, how much money have you raised for Katie Thine's daughter?
So I will tell you, I could not give you an exact number about Katie's daughter, Reagan. What we did is we set up a fund through our police foundation because I will tell you, money continues to come in. It's set up in a fine for her when she turns a certain age. And I would be remiss to say the wrong number. People have been very, very generous. Like I said, tomorrow is actually the anniversary of her death. It still has an impact on this department and always will. We talk about that to our new recruits. We talk about that to our officers. So I would not want to tell you wrong, but I can tell you it continues to grow, and there is a fund set up, a trust fund for her daughter. Have citizens actually called? Probably the officers on the street would have a better answer for that are actually responding to those 180,000 calls. I can tell you I get emails on the back end about thank yous. If my assistant was here, Donna, she would tell you that citizens call in and I want to thank Officer so-and-so for taking time with my son. He's very, very frustrated. He's out of school. He can't see his friends, and he's just acting out. And your officer came and played a wrestling or a Madden football game with him. Now, we didn't do too well, right? But for her to email that and say that he took that time, that my son's frustrated, I hear it on the back end. The officers, the officers who work around the clock, I think, are the ones to best answer that question. I think when they sit down and talk to people and you get to the root of things, I think that is a big issue, a lot of frustration that people have. Even now, when does school start back? I know Dr. Parker is struggling and doing struggling with that very issue. When do we put schools back? I've got SROs that are we putting them back into schools? Is that going to happen? How do we look for staffing with that? Those are real issues. I think we just have to take a breath. We talk to our officers all the time. We do a weekly video to send out messages to them that I just encourage them to take a breath, take your time, take a step back, and remember that issues that citizens are facing, it's some of the same issues that police officers are facing. I have single parents that their kids are out of school and they're having to make some hard decisions. Whether they take a leave of absence, can we work another shift? We face the same things. I've had officers that have lost family members to COVID, that have families members that are sick. I remember getting, and I'm here and my mom and dad are back in Ohio. And my mother had gotten sick. And I had citizens that they would write in and ask it or call in and ask about her. Now she's doing well, but it affects all of us. So I think that's one thing that integrates, that brings us together, that we all are facing some of the challenges in this country. So when we go to those calls, I want officers to keep that in the back of their mind, that some of the things we're seeing and the frustration that people have, it's not against this uniform or this badge. It's not personal. It's against some of the things, just the frustrations that are coming on, and we've got to work through it together.
Out of everything you went over, what do you think is the biggest achievement for the department over the last year, and what do you think is the biggest obstacle?
So the reason there's so many slides is because I think it's collective. I don't think you could pull one piece out. I think there's a couple things that, one, when I see that crime reduction, that means that the officers are working hard and citizens are working with them. When I see the complaints go down, when our calls for service are going up, and I see complaints continue to go down, I think that's an achievement. I think that our conversations, when we had our demonstrations, our protests, our rallies, that we didn't have vandalism. We didn't have to make any arrests. We detained some individuals, stopped walking in the middle of the street or into oncoming traffic, but we didn't have any of those situations. That we walked with individuals walking in our streets. We've had conversations. We're talking with DCJS about how to get better. We're ahead of the game on trying to address issues with homelessness and mental illness and overdoses, working with paramedics and clinicians, right? That we put officers in the hospital to observe some of the individuals that come in. I'm saving about 36 hours in overtime a week because of how we've structured. Our clearance rates that are all above the national average, that's because they're the goals of people working together. Having that 911 center staffed, That was a huge success for us. That was one of our top priorities. Here's the other. By 5 o'clock today, I'm going to hire 2 more individuals to fill that academy class that start in February. When I got here in 2018, we were about 54 officers short in this department. We have seen less and less people join this profession. And there's a variety of reasons, I think, for that. But at 5 o'clock today, I'm going to hire 2 more that are going to join our class in February, mid-February. They tease me all the time, like, Chief, don't push it back anymore, right? But we'll be fully staffed in this department. 465 officers. This department will be fully staffed, and I still have people that want to come here and work. That's important. And when I ask individuals, I remember 25 years ago, sitting in front of the chief at Richmond at the time, and I remember the guys in my class, we talked about, oh, this is the place to be. You can be an officer here. There's excitement here. It's 100 miles an hour. When I ask people today, when they sit across from me, why do you want to get in law enforcement? You get a lot of, I want to help people, I want to give back. But when I ask people why they want to come here, there are Suffolk and Portsmouth and Hampton right across the street. All of the 7 cities are competing for talent. They're competing for good officers. And we talk about the national conversation about bringing good people into your organization. How are you recruiting? How are you training? How are you getting people here? When I ask them, why do you want to come to Newport News? They talk about, the first thing they say is, we see what you're doing in the community. We see what you're doing with youth. We see that you guys are open and transparent. We see that you're trying to get ahead of the game and do different things. We're talking to officers on the street. We talk to people in the community and they say, hey, you should apply with the Newport News Police Department. I'm not saying we're better than anybody else. But what I'm saying is those conversations are real. So if you ask me what those successes are, our crime reduction, our relationship with our community, the training, trying to be ahead on the front end, that we've got that 911 center staffed. We're going to, by 5 o'clock today, we're going to be fully staffed in that academy. We've got an academy that will start in mid-February, one that's going to graduate in March, and we're already starting to look at the one that will happen in July. Those things are successes for me, and that we continue to strive to push and do better. We had an assistant chief that just got hired in Pineville, North Carolina, as the chief of police, Chief Hudgens. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. We were able to make some changes here. Chief Creswell came on board, and he's been thrown right into it. One of his top priorities right now is to make sure that we get everybody vaccinated in this department, right? All those things, different facets, crime, community relations, the morale of the organization. I've got a great team around me. I give them all the credit. And when we fall short, then that's on me. I've got to come up with different strategies and ideas. But the leadership team that we have in this department, the men and women that come to work here, the training academy and staff, and it's not just those that wear this uniform. It's also those civilians that work here in our records department, our assistants in each precinct. They make a world of difference. So collectively, all of those things I think is what I would call a success of the way that the culture of this department is coming together working with our city. Okay? Anybody else? Are we good? Thank you all so much for joining me today. I'm sorry if I held you too long. It was not my intent, but I am excited about some of the things that the department's doing and successes we've had working with our community. Okay? You guys have a great day.